Hello friends, thank you for joining me today. So I am actually on top of this review, this set of reviews. It is April 1st and I am filming my March wrap-up. So I don't like to spend a whole lot of time on intros, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get into all of the books that I read in March. The first thing that I read this month was Nettle and Bone by Kingfisher. And this is a dark fantasy horror about a princess named Mara who grew up in a convent away from all of the court politics of her family, and she embarks on this difficult and dangerous quest to kill the abusive prince that is responsible for the suffering of her two older sisters, and she has to enlist the help of a motley crew of characters to help her do this, starting with this witch called the Dust Wife, who gives her these 3 impossible tasks to complete before she will help her and kind of kick off this journey. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I did a dedicated video review of this, which I will link on the screen and below if you want to check that out. So I'm not going to go really too deep into it here. Kingfisher writes horror really well, and this was also very charming and funny at times as well, and the characters were so likable. I liked the dark fairy tale vibe. I can't wait to read more by her, so check out my review if you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts. And then I read The Luminaries by Susan Dennard. This is the first in a YA urban fantasy series following a girl named Winnie Wednesday, and the last name refers to her clan of sorts within this organization called the Luminaries. There are 7 of them, all based off of days of the week, and they all have different skills and kind of mottos, and Winnie's family has been ostracized and labeled as outcasts because her father betrayed their community. And Winnie is determined to pass these upcoming trials that will make her a hunter and regain her family's status and respect in the community. And the deal with the Luminaries is that they hunt nightmares that are created in the forest every night. And Winnie discovers this elusive and powerful nightmare that no one has ever encountered before during her trials that she is trying to warn people about. This was a 3 out of 5 stars. I got this in Owl Crate. The dark blue sprayed edges are very pretty. It's a very pretty book, and this moved at a pretty fast pace. This is only about 300 pages, and I like me a fast-paced book that doesn't waste time, and this was like that. I like Dennard's writing style in general, and she's the author of the Witchlands series, and I plan to read Truth Witch eventually. It's on my shelves right now, but this book really didn't do a good job of making any progress towards answering most of the questions set up in this book. And I know that it's the first in a series, so we aren't meant to solve all of the mysteries, but you're really not given much at all, not much payoff. The main plot is watching Winnie progress through the trials, which is resolved by the end, but all of the other plot threads and mysteries that are meant to intrigue you and entice you to keep reading the series are just not there. You know what they are, what the issues are, and they just aren't addressed. Like, you know almost nothing by the end that you don't know when the questions are first introduced. So while I liked Winnie and I liked the monster hunting in a creepy forest, the bigger plot itself was just oddly stagnant and unsatisfying. I still liked the writing style though, and the prose, and it was a fast read. I'm hoping that her Witchland series, which is like straight up fantasy, not urban fantasy, will be more engaging because I do like her prose and her writing style. And then I went back to reading the Heartstopper graphic novels, starting with volume 2. I read volume 1 in February, and Heartstopper is about two teenage boys, Charlie and Nick, who become friends and fall in love. And it is truly just one of the most wholesome and cute things I've ever read. And this volume in particular focuses a lot on respecting where people are at in their journey to exploring their sexuality and how comfortable they feel coming out about it. And like, I don't know, I guess I'm growing weak or something, because this managed to make me cry within the first 5 minutes of reading it. And then again, near the end. It is so kind and wholesome and adorable. So yeah, 5 stars, just like the first volume. And I also read volume 3, and this was just as adorable, but there are some heavier topics addressed in this one than there were in the first 2 books. There's more blatant homophobia and discussions about self-harm and eating disorders, but there were funny moments as well, just like in the other books, and it's just as sweet as ever. I don't know, I just highly recommend this series if you're looking for a cute, you know, YA, middle grade YA romance that is very quick, easy to read, and, you know, if you're just wondering what the hype is about, like, it 100% has lived up to the hype for me, which is kind of crazy considering that contemporary romance is generally not my thing. And I know that this is stupidly obvious, but this series is just so gay. If, like, everyone is gay. If you want to read a graphic novel where straight people are in the minority, then this is it. Then I finished the audiobook for The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cooke. There are 4 different narrators on this, one for each POV, and I can't remember all of their names, so I'll put them on the screen. This is a supernatural mystery fiction, I guess. Not entirely sure how to categorize this, but it's about a woman in her 30s named Luna, whose mom and 2 sisters went missing decades before while they were on this Scottish island called Haven. And in the present day, Luna is reunited with her younger sister named Clover, but somehow Clover is the exact same age as the day she disappeared, which was, I think, 7 years old. And this is told in a split timeline, and in the past you're following Luna's mom named Liv as she brings Luna and her family to Haven to paint a mural in this old lighthouse on a commission. And women accused of witchcraft had been killed on the island centuries before, and the locals warn her about the presence of wildlings who are said to spirit away children and take on their form. So you might surmise the connection between what Luna starts to suspect with her long-lost sister. There's basically a 3rd timeline as well that's like a story within a story. You're reading from the diary of a man called Patrick Roberts, written in the 1600s. And this was a 3-star, I think rounded up from 2.5. And I've read plenty of books with lots of POVs before, and I generally don't have a problem with that. And maybe listening to the audiobook contributed to this a bit, but the structure of this book was really chaotic and mildly confusing, jumping between the POVs, and almost all of the exciting and interesting stuff happened in the last 20% of the book, and the rest of it felt meandering and kind of dragged out. I think that I liked Liv's sections the most, the mom. I liked the relationship that grows between her and this guy who comes and is doing plaster work on the lighthouse. The actual ending of the book and the explanation was fine. It was fine, and it kind of leans into a different genre almost than the ones that I said before. So I don't know. I didn't like not enjoy my time listening, but I didn't love it. And I wouldn't even say that the ending was necessarily like mind-blowing or anything, despite the twists. And I guess my lack of being able to describe my thoughts on this exactly, like because it's kind of blah, says something about it in a way. It was a very fine book, and that's it. So 3 stars, rounding up from 2.5. And then I finished the second book in a series, which is Shorefall by Robert Jackson Bennett, which is part of the Founders trilogy. And the first book is called Foundryside, and I don't want to spoil anything about the series, but it takes place in a fantasy world with a magic called scriving, which uses these kind of coded commands affixed to or engraved on objects to sort of give them sentience, and it lets people control them and make them do things that they normally wouldn't be able to, and basically society in this world runs off of scriving. The series has a very steampunk vibe and aesthetic, which is really cool, and the main character is a girl named Sancha, who is a thief. And in book 1, she's tasked with stealing this powerful artifact that is very important and plays a role in the second book as well, and will also play a role in the third book. And book 2 takes place 3 years after book 1, and Sancha and her allies are basically trying to spark a revolution against the merchant houses who run the city. And I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I also gave book 1 4 out of 5 stars. The world building is really cool. The magic system is really unique and in depth, and it reminds me of Brandon Sanderson's magic systems, where there are lots of like rules to how it all works, and then the author plays with those rules and shows you the cool things that can be done with it. This book was very action-packed. There isn't much character development in this one. There's really only one character named Gregor who seems to have much change or growth, but the characters are still great. They're great as they are. I enjoy them a lot. And this series has very like anti-capitalist messages, lots of kind of philosophical discussions about power and if it's even possible for humans not to oppress other humans, and if it's possible, you know, to live in a world of equality. There was a really cool bad guy in this one, and there's a questionable ally from the end of the last book, and you don't really know what they're up to, and it was fun getting back into this world. And the author did a fantastic job recapping the first book, which was crucial for me because I read book 1 at this point about 4 years ago, and I didn't feel like rereading the first one. So he did just a really good job recapping everything while tying it into the plot, and it didn't just feel like one big info dump. I will definitely finish out the series with the last book, which I just got recently, so hopefully I will read that very soon. And I also finished the audiobook for a second book in a trilogy, and that was Grey Sister by Mark Lawrence, narrated by Heather O'Neill. And this is the Book of the Ancestor series, and the first book is called Red Sister, and it's an adult fantasy series. It's about a very young girl named Nona Gray. Like she's an actual child. She's like 8 or 9, I think, years old in book 1, and she's accused of murder and taken to the convent of Sweet Mercy, where girls are trained to become killers. And the second book takes place several years after book 1. I think that Nona is like 15 years old, and I gave this a 3.5 out of 5, but I am unfortunately rounding down to 3. It was good, but not quite as good as book 1, in my opinion. There are some standout moments in the second book, and you know, there is plot that is moved forward, but somehow, like, it's also, I don't know, kind of hard to talk about what exactly happened. I think this one was a bit more plot driven than the first one. There wasn't a whole lot of character growth in the second book, although you learn a lot more about a character named Sister Kettle, and I liked her a lot in this book. She's really cool. She's a badass. I'm interested to see how things end. Honestly, less in terms though about what happens to the characters and more about what the bigger picture is, what it has to do with the planet and the ice situation. So I'm more interested in that than necessarily how each individual character story ends, but I am looking forward to finishing the trilogy. And the last book that I finished this month was this chonker, which is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. And this is one of the most uniquely written books that I've ever read, and it's an adult fantasy following these two warriors named June and Kima, who are helping this ancient god make her way across the land over the course of 5 days in order to end the rule of the Moon Throne. And the emperor of this land has 3 sons who are called the Three Terrors, and they are cruel and vicious, and they inherited powers from this god who they had been keeping imprisoned beneath the palace. And the god escapes with the help of June, and they go on this epic journey to defeat and escape the Three Terrors and rid the land of the Moon Throne. And this is told in first, second, and third person perspective, and they are all intertwined in a very, literal and interesting way. There are no chapters in this book, only parts divided into each of the 5 days, and it's also a story within a story. And I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I did round up from what would probably be a 3.5 for me. I did an entire separate review of this book, so again, I will link that so that you can check out my full thoughts. And I did enjoy this overall, but the writing style in terms of prose isn't what I prefer. It's a little too flowery and lofty for my taste, but it was really action-packed once it got going, which didn't take long, and the world building is good. I'd say it's more plot-driven than character-driven, and it's also very gory and bloody at times, but it has themes of identity and legacy, and it's a bit of an ode to storytelling, I think. There's also a male-male romance subplot, and I think that the author succeeded in telling a very rich story in a very interesting way, so that uniqueness of experience is why I'm bumping it up to 4 stars for Goodreads. So those are all of the books that I read in March. I had some really interesting reads, and also I'm looking at this. I started watching Heartstopper on Netflix. I think I'm like 4 or 5 episodes in, and it's very cute. It does follow the books pretty closely. They added a couple kind of different friendship dynamics. I think added a character that maybe she is in the books, but a girl named Imogen. I think she might actually be a character in the books, but her relationship with Nick is not what it is in the show compared to the books. But I am enjoying the show. It's really cute. I think that the casting was pretty spot on. I'm enjoying it. And yeah, I still have the 4th book still to read. I'm saving it for a rainy day. And I know that volume 5 is coming out this year. So that's going to be really great. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next one. Goodbye.